Don't wait until it happens and it's too late, because when you look in the mirror, you say, oh, I wonder what those people look like, and then you find out that it's you. It could be me, right? So we have to get involved early. Somebody needs to do something about those kids. You're right. Somebody needs to do something, and somebody is you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Warrior Podcast. My name is Frank Lardino. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Robert Renteria. He is an award-winning Latino author. He is an activist to build leaders in America. He's just a truly good soul. I'm honored to have him on my podcast. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. Thank you, Dr. Renteria, for joining us today.
Oh, my God. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Before we start, I want to give a shout out to Mr. Jim Rabb, who introduced us.
Yeah.
He came into my life recently and become a very good friend already. He loves to bring people together. So, Jim, if you're watching this, we're both grateful for you. Dr. Renteria wrote a book. This is the book here. It's called From the Barrio to the Boardroom. This is like kind of his life story, and he's going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to dive into some cool stuff. So please, Doctor, the abbreviated version, because I know you've told the story 1,000 times by now.
Well, thank you. First, I'd like to say that the book From the Barrio to the Boardroom, although it has my name on it, Robert Renteria, it's really not the Robert Renteria story. What I mean by that, it's our story. It's a story of people who work hard, come from tough places, make a lot of sacrifices, but in the end, do whatever we have to do legally to come out clean on the other side. So I did grow up in the barrio of East L.A., the barrio, and we're born into poverty. As a child, I slept on a smelly mattress on a concrete floor in a smelly basement, and I'd be woken at night, middle of the night, by the sound of mouse traps popping, and the house was infested with mice, rats, and roaches. It was terrible. And then my mother, when she got married, she didn't know my father was doing drugs because she was in love with his good looks and his smooth-talking ways, but it turned out my dad was a heroin addict and alcoholic. At the age of 3, he left our family, and the only legacy he left us was a pile of bills and a bunch of empty bottles of booze in the trash can. And my mother working 2 and 3 jobs just to make sure that myself and my little sister did not become part of a system. And then at the age of 3, my father left the family, and the only legacy he left us was, like I said, a pile of bills. And at the age of 6, I was in a terrible accident. I almost died. And it was a freak accident. I had to go to a school for the mentally challenged, and took 3 years of rehabilitation to come out of that school, walking out of there on my own. And at the age of 9 now, my mother remarries, and she marries an abusive drunk, and the nightmare starts all over again. And there were times where he would beat me really bad, and he'd beat up on my mother, leaving her bloody and battered. I'll come back to that later, but I got old enough, I ran away, and I found a new dysfunctional family called gangs. And I started running and gunning, stealing and dealing, and I had become my father's son. I was robbing houses, stealing cars, and selling drugs and doing drugs. And then I find out when I'm 17 that my father died in a halfway house on Skid Row. Skid Row in Los Angeles is where the homeless people live.
This is your real father?
My real father. And so I wanted to see where he lived because I spent my whole life wondering why he didn't love me. But when I got there, I realized that it wasn't that he didn't love me, he didn't love himself. So I'm walking through the hallway of the flickering lights. It was stale smelling. The place smelled like urine. And there was prostitutes and pimps and alcoholics and derelicts reaching out to me, asking me for money. So I get to the room, and I turn the key and open the door real slow, and it was like deja vu. He left me again the same way he left me, and I was only 3, with more bottles of booze in the trash can. So what I learned was a lot of people think that you can control drugs and control alcohol, but they'll always take control of you no matter what. And what it taught me is if you play with the devil, you're going to get burned. And I was playing with the devil, and I was sleeping with the devil, actually. And I made a drug deal that went bad, and the guy pulled a gun out, and he pulled the trigger, and he said, say goodnight. He pulled the trigger twice. It was a misfire. So I wrestled with the guy to the floor, and I come out, running out the side glass door, tumbling on the other side, bleeding profusely, actually, running down the street saying, God, if you let me live, I'll sin no more. And that's when I decided that I needed to get out of there because I was either going to be dead or in prison. So I joined the military, and that was the best decision of my life.
How old were you when you did that?
I signed up when I was 21 years old, and I had to go back and get my GED, though, because I had quit school, so they wouldn't let me without my GED, but I got it. I went to the adult school. I was working in the factories at night. In the morning, I was working at a bottle factory, and then I'd go in the morning to the adult school until I got my certificate. And I was served honorably as a non-commissioned officer for over 7 years. I got stationed initially overseas in Nuremberg, Germany. I worked in tactical operations. I came back stateside at the 1st Cavalry Division in Fort Hood, Texas. Then I got shipped over to Fort Bragg, where I became a paratrooper. And I worked in psychological operations for a while. And then I got shipped over to the reactivation of the 3rd Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg. I was on the reactivation team in 1989. So after I honorably served our country for over 7 years, I thought I was ready to be a leader and a man. I went back to L.A., and the guys that I had been running around with as a young teenager had elevated their game to dealing heavy drugs. Some of them got smoke and dusted in gang violence and drug violence. The others were doing hard time in a federal penitentiary, doing 25 to life, living in a 6x9, being told what to do, how to talk, how to walk, when to eat, when to sleep. And I didn't want that for myself. So what I did was I knew a guy in Chicago, and he said, hey, if you ever want to get away, give me a call. So I called him, and I came out here with $200 in a duffel bag. And back then I could only afford to eat was the RB sandwiches 5 for $5.
I love the 5 for $5.
Yeah. So after, I got a job in the commercial laundromat industry selling washers and dryers to laundromats, which eventually I got into brokerage and development. So I was working for this company for 5 years, and I got recruited in year 6. And I became vice president of a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. And I did that for 6 years. And I want to share, there's a story in that 6-year period. That first year I got like a $42,000 Christmas bonus. It was a lot of money. Back then it was a lot, and it's a lot of money today, right?
Yeah.
So I went home and I called my mother and I said, listen, I want to take you out to lunch. And I gave her a bag. And she goes, what is it for Christmas? I said, what do you think it is? And she goes, this is my necklace, because women love jewelries, right? And I said, no, open it up. And she opens up the bag and she pulls out a set of keys. And she looks at me, she goes, what does this mean? And I remembered looking at my mother, and I'm supposed to be a gangster, right? I'm crying. And I said to her, this means you never have to take the bus again. I bought my mother a brand new car.
What was the car?
It was a 1996 brand new Honda Accord.
Very nice.
Yeah. I wanted to show her that I was not a loser. Her son was a winner. So I climbed the ladder of corporate America for 6 years, and I said, I want to take a shot, right? And not a shot at tequila, brandy, or bourbon, but start my own business. And I started my own business, and 3 years later, my company became the #1 distribution company in the United States. And I thought I had everything I ever wanted. I went from sleeping on the floor to having a house on a pond. I went from riding a bike or taking a bus or hitchhiking or walking. I had a Mercedes-Benz. And I share that with you not to impress you, but to empower you. Because what I learned is the 2 greatest days in your life are the day you're born and the day you realize why you're born. And I wanted to give back. So I had this idea in 2006 that I was going to write a book to help these little gang kids, right? Kids that are walking around lost in a culture of darkness. I want to do something about it. I want to write a book and create a roadmap and a blueprint. So when the book came out in January 2008, I thought I was done. I was going to have bragging rights. Just tell my friends, hey, I wrote a book, no big deal. And then I got a call from the Secretary of Education here in Chicago. And I met with that team. They said, we want to teach the book. And then a curriculum was created for the book, and it was game on at that point.
Wow.
So I shut my business down when I was top of my game, and I took a blind leap of faith to serve a higher purpose. So I spent the last 16 years now working with kids all over the country, and now in over 25 countries around the world.
That's a fantastic story. I have a lot of questions about all through the things that you went through, because your mindset throughout the years, like, I want to know what was going through your head. For instance, going back to the childhood, you grew up poor, and then you had a kind of a horrific, almost life-ending injury. I believe you got hit by like the octopus ride at the carnival,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And it split your head open. Like, they didn't know if you were going to survive.
No.
As you're coming out of this as a boy, if you remember, like, did you have any kind of depression? What was going through your head?
I mean, I was horrified. I mean, I had to wear a football helmet, and I had to develop my motor skills. And I went to the school, like I said, for the physically disabled and mentally challenged, where I went through rehab. And there was a lot of kids that were deformed, missing arms and legs. They couldn't talk, and it was something like out of a bad dream. So I remember being scared as a child, and I don't remember being depressed. I just remember wanting to get out of there.
When you got out in public, did you still have the helmet on?
Yes, I had to wear the helmet for a few years because my head was like egg yolk. You know, it was so damaged. I suffered a compound fracture, so a bone came out of my head. They had to rewire everything, push it all back in, and then I had to heal. And, you know, and that all after I came out of a coma, right? So, I mean, it was a struggle there. But, you know, quitting was never an option. And
yeah, see, that's what's interesting. Like, so here's what happened to me. I grew up in the hood also on the west side of Chicago. Every garage had graffiti on it. I was never in a gang. Single mom. She was an alcoholic and later died of a heroin overdose. And so I was by myself a lot. And when you're little and like you either survive or you don't. And if you become a survivor, you are by nature an optimist. You default always to how do I get out of this, right? And I think, you know, maybe that's what happened to you because you just said, you know, giving up was not an option. So you probably had pretty good survival wiring by that time, and your father was already doing bad stuff to you prior to the injury, correct?
Right. I mean, he was a good provider, right? Not give him his props, right? He went to work every day and we had shoes on our feet and clothes on our back and food on the table. But when he had the liquor in his body, he was not the same person. You know, he's just a cantankerous old man. He's got dementia and he's no longer drinking. He found his way to the Lord. My mother forgave him and they're still married, but, you know, he's on his last chapter.
The stepfather.
Stepfather, yes.
So before I want to ask a couple questions about your mom. What happened with you and your father? Did you forgive him?
When I went to the wake where they got a hold of us that he had died, and I went to see him for the viewing. I didn't know who he was. Didn't recognize him. I had no emotions towards him. I just wanted to know who he was. You know, I wanted to see him. But if I had seen him on the street while he was alive, I wouldn't recognize him.
Wow.
I mean, I saw him when I was 3 years old, and then the next time, 17. So I didn't know him. His family was not engaged with us, so they didn't care either, whether we had food or shoes or anything. So my mother was on her own, you know, so we never had support from that side of the family, my real father's side.
So here's another little thing we have in common a bit. So my father took off when I was an infant. And when my mother died, she had me when she was a teenager and she died when I was a teenager. So at her wake, a little old lady came up to me and she grabbed me and she was crying. And I asked my Aunt Rose, who was raising me at the time, who is this? She said, that's your other grandma. So every year around December, January, my mom died in December, my other grandma would call me and she'd say, how are you? This is your grandma. And we'd have a couple words. Now, I grew up never wanting for a father because my mother had 7 brothers. They all took a part in raising me. I mean, I was surrounded by good mentoring male energy. And now I'm like 25 years old and I get the call, this is your grandma. And it just occurred to me to ask, is my father there? And she's like, well, he's here, but he can't talk. I said, please put him on the phone. And he said, I'm here. So he must have been on the other phone. And I said, I think it's time we meet, don't you? So he came to my house. It was my first little house. My grandma and Aunt Rose lived upstairs. I lived in the basement. And he brought a little boy, which was my half brother, which was cool because I'm an only child. And we talked. My father was a street guy. He didn't even finish grammar school. He was a hustler and a gangster. And he was blaming my family for us not having a relationship. And my Aunt Rose scolded him and said, that's your son. Nobody keeps you from your child, okay? Anyway, we decided we would go bowling, and then poof, he disappeared. Never called me back. So now I'm 45 years old, and I'm playing table tennis in the basement with my best friend, who's a high-powered accountant and a super powerful man. And we're hitting the ball, and I'm going, man, I would like to meet my dad and at least learn a little bit about my father's side of the family. So he puts the table tennis paddle down, and he picks up a pen. He goes, what's your father's name? And I said, Anthony Lardino. He said, you got an idea roughly where he lives? He said, I go, yeah, I think, north side of the city, maybe Elmwood Park. He gets on the phone. He's like, yeah, and he's writing down. He's like, there's his address. He's handing me so I wrote my dad a letter. one thing led to another, and then we got together. So I've only seen him once in 45 years. We had dinner and took a couple pictures, and I was taking notes because I didn't know anything about my family history. I know I'm named after my Uncle Frank. He was in an orphanage. He busted out of the orphanage, joined the Army, went to Korea. He was the youngest member of the Army band. His buddies got killed. He quit the band, went to the front line where he was killed. So I have a picture of him up there. He died. He was 19 years old. So I met with my dad like 4 or 5 times. He blamed me for us not having a relationship over and over again. And I just kept telling him, no, this is on you. And then finally I was able to get to him. I said, all right, here's one thing we have in common. We're both fathers, right? So when that first child was born and I was in the room with my wife and they hand that little baby to me while my wife's all torn apart over there, something happens to you that there will be no force great enough on God's good earth that will keep me from that child. That's what fatherhood's about. So you dropped the ball. So he eventually admitted that. I didn't have any respect for the man because he just blamed everybody and everything for his plight in life. So anyway, I stopped visiting him. I used to bring him food and wine and never gave him any money because he was a gambler. Well, after I met him, all these people in my father's family line, they start contacting me. And I'm making friends. I got cousins, aunts, this and that. And one of my father's cousins, she sent me the family tree and all this stuff. Well, after a few years of not visiting him, she called me. Her name's Beverly. And she said, your father's on hospice and he's not going to be around too much longer. And I just thought you'd want to know. I said, well, I appreciate that. So I contemplated, do I do anything about this? Well, I ended up calling him. And I said, hey, Dad, this is your son. How you doing? He's like, I'm checking out and it's okay. He goes, I'm only 85 pounds or whatever, but I'm in so much pain and they can't make the pain go away. So hopefully I'll be through this quick sooner than later. And it's pretty powerful to say something like that. And I thought to myself, I said, you know what, Dad, I'm proud of you. And he goes, why are you proud of me? I did nothing for you. I said, well, I'm proud of you for 3 reasons. Number one, you grew up on the street. You had a really tough life. Being on the street is not easy, and you're a survivor. You're tough. I said, 2, you took care of your mother till the day she died, and that's very noble, and that's the highest and best thing you can do for your parents. And I go, lastly, you finally got it right with Anthony. You raised a child all the way through. You stayed with him. He's in the Air Force. He's a drill instructor. He's a magnificent man. And I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. And he goes, wow, you have no idea how much that means to me. And he died a few days later. So that's how I reconciled my father. I didn't respect him. And there was really nothing even for me to forgive him for because I didn't have any vindication against him. But a lot of times people, they have this thing with abusive parents, like you have a thing now with your stepfather who's not a nice guy, right?
Well, my mother asked me when we found out he had dementia a couple of years ago, to make peace with him because I hadn't talked to him in years. And, so you're not going to say no to mom. So, of course, I call him and I talk to him and he was in denial. He says, I don't know why you don't like me. I never did nothing to you. And I said, we're not even going to talk about it, right? So I made peace out of respect for my mother. But I have no emotional ties to the guy. Mm-hmm. I don't call him. I don't send him Christmas cards or birthday cards. And I don't want to be disingenuous, right? Mm-hmm. But for my mother, respect for her and the love I have for her, so I made peace because of that. Should I be more, I don't know what the right word is, sensitive or whatever, but I just, I don't believe in that a man should hit a woman, right? And forget the fact that he hit me. But he left my mother bloody and battered, right? Which is why I'm really big about this program I'll share with you we developed over the last 18 years. It's about prevention over intervention. So I have an anti-violence prevention program because you never put your hands on a woman. I've said this in one of my talks that, women aren't just beautiful and smart, but they're the greatest gifts that God ever created in his lifetime, in this lifetime.
Now, I was going to circle back and ask you that question, why do you say that? How do you frame that out? I was raised by women. My Aunt Rose is my angel on earth. My book's dedicated to her, and your mother sounds just like her.
Well, so. She's not just the woman who gave me life, but she's the love of my life. So all that I am and all that I ever will be is because of my mother. Mm-hmm. So I work very, very hard to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And my two sisters call me a mama's boy because I still talk to my mom every day. We talk at least once or twice. And, I want to make sure she knows that I'm doing all the right things to make her proud. So, what I've created in the last 18 years is more of a legacy piece, because if I died tonight, Barrio would live on forever. And I'll share with you some of the partnerships that we have, both, locally, state, nationwide, and international. So this thing is moving, it's scaling in real time. And what I'm trying to do is build partnerships with people so we could leave the world a better place.
Awesome. And we're gonna come all the way around full circle with that. One more question with your mom, and I've listened to all of your interviews and read all your material. How does a person like your mother, who has just a genuine good soul, right? When her day of reckoning comes, she's getting right in. She's gonna have no problem getting in. How does she wind up with these two guys? What happened there? I mean, I have a theory I'll share with you, but what do you think happened?
Well, I think that my grandparents did her an injustice. They raised her believing in blue skies and butterflies, and life doesn't work that way. So she was naive, and she was, kept away from the dark side, I guess, of what my grandparents didn't want her to be exposed to. And that didn't do her any favors because she fell victim and prey, I think, to that kind of a man.
Do you think her parents try to create kind of a little bubble around her to protect her? Is that how?
Yeah.
That's interesting because I was contemplating this myself. Like, what happened to your mom? Because she sounds like an amazing person. And I came up with the same thing. There must be some kind of naivety there. What I framed it out is good-hearted people, truly good-hearted people, they get taken advantage of, right? And I have a saying, sometimes the losers and takers get the best of us movers and shakers, but we live a way better life. And I think when you have a good heart, you think the best of people.
Yeah, I mean, I got my heart from my mother, but, I tell people don't mistake my kindness for stupidity because, I try to teach the kids, what happens when you put your street smarts with your book smarts, so what that makes you? And they said, what? I said, it makes you dangerous. So when I figured that out, so that's what I'm teaching the kids, how to be dangerous in a good way.
That's awesome. My godfather used to say that exact same thing to me, and he was a street guy and a mafioso. He said, you have the rare combination of street smarts and book smarts, Right. And he also used to say, you show me a man who's got 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the future, and I'll show you someone who's pissing on today, he used to say. So That was one of his famous sayings. All right. As we're moving through your story here, just a few questions about the gang life, like how did you get introduced into it? How did you get led into being in the street gang then?
Well, the drug part was about making money, and I joke at it. I was never malicious. I was never somebody who's trying to hurt people. And the truth be told, that girls are expensive, so we needed some money to take out the girls. That's where it all came from.
And some things never change.
Yeah, some things never change, right? So which is why I'm still single, but. That's another story for another podcast. I think that I was just looking for love in all the wrong places, and I was in, everybody wants to be part of something, right? That need to be, felt like you're a part of something bigger. And the gangs was just that part of that process of my life, that period of my life. But I was never out to hurt people. So it wasn't like I was a bad guy. I just wanted the money because I needed to, I love women. Girls are expensive.
So what kind of money were you making then? Were you real flush with cash, or were you making enough just to...
Compared to today's numbers, today's, it's a real business, right? Back then, it was just side hustle.
Right.
So if I had money to take a girl out to eat and I go out and buy her something nice, I think at the top of, that game that I was playing at the time, I think that the most I ever made at any one given deal was like $16,000. That was the most I ever made on a deal.
Which was a lot of money back then,
yeah,
right?
It was a lot of money, but it wasn't like I was a major drug lord. I'm not going to pretend that I was this major mafioso. I was a little, small-time punk.
And you didn't have any delusions of grandeur? You didn't want to, be a kingpin? No. You just wanted to make enough and fly underneath the radar, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you because you said when you had the drug deal gone bad, and the guy pulled a pistol on you, which has got to be terrifying. Okay. I'm a gun guy, and I was at the gun range, and there was a young lady outside the shooting booth, and she's doing this with her pistol, and the pistol was passing the plane of all the shooters, and I'm like, that freaked me out. And that was just because she wasn't exercising safety. I've never had a gun pointed like that, so that had to freak you out. But you had mentioned when you got out of there, you busted through the glass, you were bloody and stuff, and you said, God, get me out of this. And, where was your faith then up until that point? You see what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I think you find yourself wanting to make a deal with God, but I never turned back. I mean, I used to go to church. At that time, it was Catholic church. And then eventually I found my way to Fundamental Baptist Church, where I found Christianity. And, so I became a born-again Christian. And, I mean, I'm not out there trying to save the world, so to speak. I keep my faith pretty private. But, I mean, some people walk by sight, I walk by faith, which is how I built Barrio. I mean, I took a blind leap of faith to serve a higher purpose. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, what do I know about, critical thinking and social emotional learning and all the other stuff that we with the life lessons that we teach in these books? But I've been on this mission, like I said, for 18 years, and I'll walk you through the whole book series and the curriculum. But we've invested, when I say I've invested about $400,000 now in the last 18 years to bring programming to the kids that are culturally relevant. So for me, it was about making a difference in the educational system, which I believe is fractured.
I agree with you, and we'll get to that too. I just want a few more questions about the story you told. So you were in the military for 7 years. You had said in one of the interviews that it was your godfather had an influence on that. Yes.
Yeah, he had served in the military, and from time to time he talked about it. So I think when I got away, it was probably because of him. But he did sit me down, and when I told him I had joined, he says, it'll make you or break you. He says, if you follow, the system will work for you. If you buck the system, it'll break you. So I became a good, student of life in general, but I took his advice.
So tell me then, I've never been in the military. That's one of my regrets of not doing it. I have a Marine who lives with me. Off the top of your head, some of the main takeaways you had being in the military? What are some life skills that you would say were invaluable that you still use?
I think the camaraderie piece, the whole band of brothers, we were all wearing green, Army green. So we weren't trying to kill each other. We're looking for each other's backs. So it taught me the teamwork. I think one big thing it taught me was character, because character is not just doing what's right when somebody's watching you. It's doing the right thing when nobody's watching you. So that was my big takeaway, and the whole camaraderie piece. And, whether you're black or brown or Asian, or it didn't matter, right? We're all the same.
Do you have any friends still from the military that you keep in contact with?
There's one that I still keep in pretty good touch with. Every month or so we get on the phone.
Yeah, very cool. And I wanted to ask you, backtracking to the street gang days, did you have a go-to person? Did you have a friend like, I can count on this person, like somebody that you could really confide in back in those days?
There was a group of us, that we ran together like a little wolf pack. We had our own little pack. And, so anytime something went down, we're always together. So it was, we never went off and went on our own and going rogue, because there was always strength in numbers, right? So you had to have people around you to make sure that they had your back. So like if we went to go rob somebody or go beat up somebody or whatever, it was always with the group.
So that's kind of similar to the military, right? Like there is a camaraderie in the gangs too. There is a code, right?
Well, it's a dysfunctional code, right? Somebody asked me, I was at a school, it was Latin kids, and they wanted to know the name of the gang I was in. And I said, you guys want to really know the name of the gang? They said, yeah. I said, it's the same name that every other gang is across the country. They have the same name. They said, what's that? So in Spanish, I said, Los Pendejos. I said, you got to be stupid to be in a gang. So that's the name of the gang, Los Pendejos, right? Because you got to be stupid. It's
I love that.
Walking around in circles. It's like a dog chasing your tail. It makes no sense.
I love that. Now we've gone from the military to the corporate world. You just put your nose to the grindstone. You made a unbelievable climb. I'd like to ask you to just tell the story when you first did your first interview, and you went past the interviewer to the owner of the company, right? And you were sitting with him. Tell that one.
Well, he thought I didn't have, the skill set, and he said that, I have no sales background, and, thank you for coming and I appreciate it. Good luck. And as he got up to leave, as I recall, I said, excuse me. I said, I speak Spanish. I'm very loyal and honest. I'll work hard, right? And I had heard that the reason they were looking for somebody is, I don't know if I put this in my book or not, but they had caught somebody stealing, right? So I said to him, and I would never steal from you. And he looked at me and I'll be back. And he went out of the office. He came back, sat down with me, and he hired me on the spot. So I made one last, ditch effort to, hey, give me a chance. And he gave me a chance.
That's awesome. Now, is that the same owner that you went to and said, I'd like a bigger role, I would like to be sitting in at the meetings? Is that the same man?
Yeah. I mean, there was another side to this guy, right? And not taking a punch at the guy, but he was a racist. And I didn't know that when I first went there. But he'd say stuff like at the Christmas party, he'd lean over and he'd say, hey, listen, they're not going to be serving tacos tonight. Or we'd be in the warehouse, hey, let me use your switchblade. Or I remember one time we were at a pizza parlor for lunch with all the sales guys, and he leaned over, he goes, hey, if it doesn't work out with me, maybe they'll hire you. Like to be a busboy. So those kind of jabs that he would take at me. So, but all he did was he provoked me into action, right? When he didn't want to hire me because I didn't have the right skill set, when I made it to corporate America, I had a bullseye on his back. I was having his lunch and all his sales guys' lunch every single day. I was smoking those guys.
Right. But what did he say when you wanted to elevate yourself within the company?
You don't have what it takes. He said, you should be happy with where you're at. And he wanted to keep me where he wanted to keep me at that level. But I wanted more. And why not, right? I mean, this is America. So I wanted more. And he was not going to allow me the opportunity to go get more with him. So I went and found it someplace else.
So I love that. I wanted to ask you about the corporate world. Now, I've only been involved in the corporate world in small bits and pieces. I worked for a small company which had a corporate structure. Everybody was talking bad about everybody else. It was a little office of 50 people. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I was in my 40s. This is my theory, and you would know better because you were really entrenched in the corporate world. Corporations are not set up in such a way where if you're a youngling, you come into the corporation and you're a genius, like you've got great ideas that will increase the profitability. They don't want to hear it. Am I right about that?
Well, for a large part. I mean, I was the only Latino executive in the corporation. The only Latinos at the company are the people driving trucks or the service technicians. I challenged the status quo, right? They would say stuff like, what university did you graduate from? Or what's going to be your methodology for this, what you're trying to do? I'm like, first of all, I had to go to the dictionary and find out what methodology meant. But eventually that first year I worked for the company, I sold everybody in the company, right? I think mine was like 1.2 million at 36%. And everybody else was at 400,000 to 600,000 at say 24%. So the CEO pulled me aside at the end of the annual conference that first year. He said, can you replicate what you've done with everybody else? Of course, I said, yes. I'm going to, take my shot. He opened the door. I'm going to take the shot. The military, one shot, one kill, right? So I went for it, and the rest is history, right? I ran a multi-million-dollar division of the company. I think it was 6 million to 80 million in 6 years. We scaled it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I was in charge of the acquisition. So what happened was they put me in after the company went public, we go out and buy other companies, and I'd set up the sales force, get them up and running, and then we go buy another company. So going through the IPO and then going public and all that was a good life lessons for me to start my own business. So what I learned on their dime.
All right, and then eventually you're like, I'm done with the corporate structure. I'm going to do it on my own. Which that to me in life, if you're going to make money, the most satisfying way is if you build something yourself, which you did. But where in there was the it's time to give back. And before you answer that question, there was a study they did at one of the universities with old people. And, basically old people don't regret what they've done in life. They regret what they didn't do. Mm-hmm. And then they came up with this conclusion that there's basically 3 phases of life if we live long enough. The first phase is about learning and achieving. Like we get really entrenched in that. And if we live long enough to get to the point where we have success and we have built some wealth, that middle portion is we start to want to give back a little bit. And then if we live long enough, then we start to think about our legacy. what are we going to leave behind, right? So like I skipped over the second part, like giving back. I went right to the third part because my best friend got diagnosed with cancer, and that's another whole story that shook me into. I always said life is short, but I wasn't living my life in such a way where I actually believed that. So I went right into the legacy piece. Like, what am I going to leave behind?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you're at. Like, where was the transition from make money, achieve, have my own company, and be like, oh, I'm missing the boat here. Was there a aha moment in that?
Oh, I had never been involved in any community, anything, chambers of commerce. I was just living in my bubble. And then I met these two gang kids, 2006, when I pulled up in front of a restaurant bar, and they were out front, and they said, "Hey man, your car's fat." I said, "My car's fat." He said, "Yeah, it's cool. How do I get one?" And I said, "How old are you guys?" 22 and 23. I said, "I'll buy you guys a beer. Come on in." So they came in, and they had the tattoos, and these guys are homeboys, right? And so the one guy said, "So what's your secret?" I said, "Get a napkin and a pen from the bartender. I want you to write something down." So he's get ready to go. He's got these big brown hungry eyes. He's getting ready to write it down. I said, 2 words. He said, "What?" I said, "Hard work." And he wrote it down. He looks at the napkin. He goes, "Dude, hard work, that's it?" I said, "That's it." So believe it or not, he put the napkin in his pocket. They both reached out, shake my hand, and they took off, got in the car. I saw him drive off like I gave him gold. I said, "There's a story here." That's why I had the idea to write a book. And then at the time, as I went through the process and getting involved with the chambers and going and speaking to kids, it became like a drug. I became addicted, because now I'm shaping lives in real time, right? Too much is given, much is obligated and expected. And, so I learned that the 2 greatest days of your life are the day you're born and the day you realize why you're born. So, this whole journey with Barrio teaches people that the greater the struggle, the greater the victory, that your pain, my pain, our pain is not in vain, right? So that's the space I'm in now. And we've built a whole program in the last 18 years that is being used in multiple verticals. So it's not just kids. Here in Illinois, we're in 28 Illinois state prisons. Last year, Secretary of State Jesse White put us in 150 libraries, right, throughout the state. We have national, international partnerships with people that we can help elevate our kids so they can spread their wings and fly like the angels God intended them to be.
I love that. Did I hear one of your interviews? You said you thought that those 2 guys in the bar, they might have been angels.
Yeah, I've never seen them before, never seen them after. So I think God was speaking to me through those 2 kids, because how could I never see them again? I live in a small town, so you see a lot of the same people.
Right.
Never saw them again.
That's interesting. So one of the things I love is your programs are going everywhere, but they're well anchored with young people. And you had mentioned before, you said our educational system is fractured. What did you mean by that?
I think they're teaching to test, not teaching to learn, right? When we have kids graduating 4 years below their reading level, so you're graduating somebody at 12th grade, but they have an 8th grade reading level, and they're not proficient in math either. So let me just share with you briefly, right? So in 2008, I released this book right here, From the Barrio to the Boardroom. And then I get a call from Chicago Public Schools, and we crafted a curriculum for the book. It's a chapter-by-chapter outline of this book, and it aligned with the Illinois State Learning Standards. So when people want that, I send it to them electronically, and then they can take it from there and implement, right? So there's a curriculum for schools at no cost. I mean, I paid for it, had it developed, I had it copyrighted, and now we donate it, right, all over the country. And so this book here, From the Barrio to the Boardroom, is mostly used in middle schools and high schools, and people older than us, but I'm focused a lot on the kids. And then we translated the book into Spanish. And then RFB&D got a hold of us, Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic, and they launched a CD nationally that helps kids that are visually impaired, have reading disabilities, and it impacts like 236,000 kids around the U.S. So now I'm in middle schools, high schools, and people older than us, and I wanted to get to the elementary school kids because of the gang recruitment. So I had an idea to cut the umbilical cord to the gang recruitment and release this book here, Mi Barrio. It's a high-end graphic novel.
Can you just open it up and show the camera what some of the graphics are? That I thought this thing was brilliant.
So this book here, Mi Barrio, My Barrio, My Hood, was voted the best graphic novel in Latin America, Spain, and the United States of America addressing youth issues. It was the #1 book in the country in 2011. So now we're working with kids 3rd grade and people older than us. And I wanted to round it off and go back to the pre-KK 1 and 2. So we crafted an activity coloring book called Little Barrio. So over the last 18 years, $400,000 later, we have developed a comprehensive, bilingual, non-generic, culturally relevant book series and program that resonates with you and promotes academic achievement. So I'm very proud that these books are now being used in multiple platforms, as I mentioned. We're homeless shelters, battered women's shelters, police, probation. It's used in libraries now. It's used in corporations. I've spoken at McDonald's, IBM, General Mills, General Motors, and Boeing. They use it as a business book. Here in DuPage County, it was a Red Roof Inn. They converted to a homeless shelter called PADS. And there's 330 people live there, 120 rooms, and 112 of those people are under the age of 17. They all have my book there. So I'm going to be speaking there in a couple months about this is just the next step. They think they're at the very bottom, but this is just the next step. That's why the PADS homeless shelter is working with these people to give them a hand up, not a hand out. So I want to let them know that it's going to be okay. I've been there. I've eaten out of trash cans, right? We were kicked out of our apartment when we were little. We were homeless. My dad died homeless. So I intimately understand the space that they're in. So that's some of the stuff in the work that I do. I go out and I talk to folks, provide them tools, not just conversation, but something they can reference back, right? So it's like spirituality. You have to evolve, right, with the Bible, right? So I believe that the Bible is saving souls, and I can say confidently that the Barrio books are saving lives. A few years ago, I was at a school before COVID, and this little 8th grader came up to me. She says, "Mr. Renteria, I was going to kill myself until I read your book. You saved a life."
Wow.
And that's one of many, many, many stories of people whose lives were either going to commit suicide or they were going to do other things that they shouldn't be doing. I was in Aurora at a restaurant a couple months ago, and believe it or not, Jim Rabb was with me. And this girl comes up to me and she says, "You're Robert Renteria." And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "How do you know me?" She says, "I read your book when I was in prison." And she says, "I want to say thank you because I was addicted to heroin. Now I got rid of my deadbeat boyfriend. I have 2 jobs. I have my own apartment. Now I take care of my kid." She goes, "Thank you."
Wow.
And she wanted a hug, right? So, okay, let's hug it out, right? So, but those are stories of real time. And people older than us say, "Hey, I quit my job because of you." And I said, "Why?" He said, "If you could do it, I could do it." And they started a business. So it's not just kids, right? It's adults. And it's not just Latino kids or Black kids or white kids. It's all kids, right? So I find myself in a space where it's a very unique space that God has placed me in. So which I say, I'm not really an author anymore. I'm more of a messenger, right? I'm providing hope to a lot of people that are in dark places.
A couple things. Just those 2 stories of those 2 people, you saved my life, and then the woman who was in prison. If those were the only 2 people that you touched, all of this would have been worth it.
Yeah.
Right? And otherwise. So that's cool. I had an interesting, just a thing about how powerful our words are, right? You wrote a book. Did you have expectations you would be anywhere where you're at right now as a result of the book?
Never. If I had made you a bet in 2006 when I started that I would be here, you told me you're going to be here in 18 years, I would have bet you that I would no way, and I'd be writing you a check today. I have no way to know this. I'm not that smart. This is not a me thing. It's a God thing. Mm-hmm. There's no way to explain that how we're in all these countries and all these relationships, like with the World Boxing Council. They're in 171 countries. They've got the book. I received an Ambassador for Peace award a few months ago from the Women's Federation of World Peace and the United Peace Federation, which sits under the United Nations. But at the bottom layer is the clergies. All of these churches are launching a national anti-violence coalition, which they want me to lead nationwide in 2024 to help kids across the country. So how could I have known? There's no way. You can't. This has never been done before, so how could you map it out, right? There was a movie that I saw years ago. You ever watch a movie called Back to the Future?
I just watched it again a couple nights ago. I loved that movie.
And that crazy doctor says, "Well, we're going, there's no roads." Well, we're going, there's no roads, right? So we're just going to just blaze a trail.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. This is part of my mantra too, and you're teaching this, but to me, the highest form of living is giving. And when you get in the habit of giving, and giving can just be kindness. Mm-hmm. It could be saying hello to somebody, thanking a veteran. You get an automatic rate of return. It's almost like cheating life, right? You're giving to society and you're getting so much more in return. like it's a beautiful thing. It almost makes life easy, I think.
Well, I'm trying to teach kids that if you do it easy, life will be hard. If you do it hard, life will be easy, right? So you got to put in the work, And I didn't mention, but there was also a faith-inspired curriculum to get kids into Bible study, lead them to Christ. So we have two curriculums that we donate: the academic curriculum for middle schools and high schools, and the faith-inspired curriculum that we work with the ministries. So if people are out there listening, they're looking for tools or resources, to please contact us, because I want to have those conversations. We're working daily, every day on building partnerships. Like I was on the phone this morning with the Elgin Township, to working with kids in the Elgin area. Then I was on the phone as well with some people in El Paso, Texas, who want me to come out next spring for a youth leadership conference in El Paso for a week, right? So, there's those conversations need to take place so that we can pull together. United we stand, divided we fall.
So let me ask you this, because you're our businessman, and what you're doing is, it's growing exponentially, which is awesome. Every day you're getting pulled in so many different directions, and the more your program grows, the more that's the case. Like, how do you deal with all that? How do you deal with the constant pressure on you to get all this stuff done?
Well, it's done through collaborative partnerships, right? As an example, somebody wants to use the Barrio books. We send them the curriculum, and they take it from there. They implement it. So they adopt the program as their own, or they use it to supplement or complement what they're already doing. So it's inspiring kids in a big way, to give them hope, right? To make a way out of no way. And I think that, so for me, it's not really the pressure. It's just a matter of finding the right people. I got offered a lot of money by a beverage company, an alcohol beverage. I won't say which company. And I told them no, because, I can't put a liquor bottle in my book and talk about responsible drinking. You don't know Latinos, right? So it's not like they're the most responsible drinkers, but I'm just saying that tongue in cheek. I want to make sure that we're not going to make a deal with the devil to be a star in hell. There's no bad deals in here. I don't owe anybody any favors, right? If I do something for somebody, it's something that's going to be above board. So there's nothing shady going on around this thing. It's clean. These are my kids, basically, right? I don't have any biological children of my own, but I have, let's say, 3.5 million kids around the world now. So for me, it's just, if there's any pressure to your question, it's having come from being in a bubble to living in a fishbowl, right? Because there's a lot of eyes on you, and there's a lot of haters out there, right? They love you on the way up. They love you more on the way down. So you got to make sure you're not hanging around with the wrong people. That's all.
I have a dear friend. I call him my big brother, and he was a high-level athlete in his time. And, he knows I'm doing podcasting, and he's helping me through that. And he said, the more notoriety you get, the more eyes that go on you, the more haters you're going to get. And he said that's how you know you're doing it right. So,
well, yeah, I understand that my spirit irritates some people's demons. But that's not.
I love that. But I'm stealing that from you.
But the issue is not with me. There's certain people who don't even want Barrio in their cities or their schools because it's not about them. I've had people say, I don't like him. He's not one of us. And, why do you, I tell them, you're no better than the gangbangers, except you know how to hide behind your titles. I said, so, you're really not a leader, right? But you just know how to hide. So you're always going to have that kind of stuff that's out there. And so, yeah, the devil's at work. And so I tell Jim, right? I've told Jim this before. I said, listen, it matters, but it doesn't matter. So water off a duck, it's not going to, whatever you think of me doesn't matter, And this whole thing with social media, with like how many followers we have, I can care less. With somebody in Colorado who I don't know has an opinion about me, how I should be conducting myself in building this program. I'm building leaders, right? Not followers. I'm just blessed that I can stand on the shoulders today of Dr. Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez to turn the key that opens the door to a whole new world for our children.
That's awesome. And we talked about this before we started the podcast, degrees of proactive. The best proactive is prevention. And that's what you're trying to do.
Well, 100%. Listen, it's prevention over intervention, right? Why are we always trying to put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, right? After the person's already been shot. If we can prevent it from happening, but if we fix problems, sadly enough, and some people listening are not going to like it, but people lose their jobs. And then you're dealing with unions, contracts, and paychecks, right? All this hypocrisy and bureaucracy. We can't find cures for cancer. Why would Big Pharma want to find a cure? When they're making trillions of dollars, right? It's all about the ailment. We have to start fixing the problem because nobody's immune. We think it only happens to inner city kids. In 2019, we had 23 school shootings across America, and every school shooting happened in suburban America behind gated communities. And every shooter, and I'm not pointing fingers, but every shooter of all those 23 schools weren't black or brown kids. Nobody's immune. I just had a friend on the Gold Coast call me. This kid was overdosed, foaming at the mouth with a needle in his arm, overdosed on heroin. Nice house, a lot of money, nice cars, good business, and the kid's overdosing. So nobody's immune. So if you're listening, please don't wait until it happens and it's too late. Because when you look in the mirror, you say, "Oh, I wonder what those people look like," and then you find out that it's you. It could be me, right? So we have to get involved early. We just can't somebody needs to do something about those kids. You're right. Somebody needs to do something, and somebody is you.
Let me ask you something, Doctor. Is all of this stuff happening by design? Is there a because my feeling is that money and power rule the day, and it's been that way since life began. Is there a guiding force that's corrupting our neighborhoods and corrupting our children? Is it done by design to keep us divided?
I think that we have to accept the fact that America and the world is a business. So they're making money on this stuff, from the prison systems to big pharma to all of it, police, prisons. I mean, it's all about money, right? I'm not saying we can't make money, and there's nothing wrong with money until money becomes your God, right? So I'm not saying we can't make money, but what I'm saying is that, there's good money and there's bad money, so I don't want to get involved with certain people because it's blood money. It's not good money. And karma's a bad thing. It'll come back and grab you, right? So you just try to align ourselves with good people who want to make a difference, right? And there are a lot of good people out there. I talked to you about sharks and dolphins. The world's a shark, but there are dolphins out there, right? Like my friend Jim, our friend Jim now, right? Or you, myself, and others like us who want to make a difference. So I think that, I'd like the listeners that you can find us at our website, by the way, at fromthebarrio.com. It's fromthebarrio, BARRIO.com.
Yep, and I'll put it all in the links too.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned karma, and I'm not deeply into the study of karma. Some people believe karma goes through lifetimes, and you could be living the life of a previous life, like something that person who lived before you had learned, and you have to learn it. It's all about balance, and it can travel through lifetimes. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I believe in karma more in a simple way, and that is you get out what you put in. So if you live like an ass, then you get ass results. You know what I'm saying? If you're a bad person and you throw out bad energy, you get bad energy back. And I think it reconciles itself as you're living your life. And by the end of your life, it puts you at a zero balance. In other words, like look at how your father ended up. That to me is the worst. That shows me that's the worst thing that can happen by putting bad energy into the world is you die alone. And he died alone. Not only did he die by himself in a room, but he died with nobody cared. Like that's a reflection of somebody who's lived a really bad life. You know what I mean? I think it balances out. What do you think?
I think I'd agree with you. I think, like you said, you get what you give. And there's no shortcuts. We can't put powder in a glass and start with have a pocket full of dough. It doesn't work that way. You got to put in the time. You got to do the work. I had somebody say to me, well, I want to be like you. And I said, what do you mean like me? He said, well, you're in the news and you got all these awards and all this other stuff. I said, listen, you got to do the work. You haven't donated any books to anybody. You haven't given away any talks. You've donated no money, no time to anybody other than just want to show up and say, you think you're famous? It doesn't work that way. Any accolades that I've received is because of the body of work we've created, right? And whatever popularity comes with that, that's not what I'm seeking, right? I want to be a change agent, right? And this is what I'm doing. I want to find other people like us to go out there and build an army and change the narrative that's happening around these kids.
Awesome. So we're going to backtrack just a little bit because you said something when we were just talking before the podcast about not liking to publicly speak. And the first thing that I watched of you was your TED Talk. And I thought it was awesome. You blasted through it and you had emotion and stuff like that. How did you, what was that process like?
Well, when the book first came out, first of all, I never expected to be here, right? So that was by itself its own transition. They wanted to come speak at schools and speak to people. I'm like, I don't think so, right? I can get 3, 4, 5, 6 people in a boardroom and knock it down. But putting in front of a crowd wasn't, so I came kicking and screaming. I didn't want to do it. And I was scheduled in 2008 to speak at this big gala. And I was nervous. And so I went to Dale Carnegie and I hired them to give me some professional speaking courses and some coaching. So, again, that's another vertical, right? But overcoming your fears. Mm-hmm. And so now I went from talking to 10 kids picking their nose in 2008 to north of 10,000 people in a stadium. So, so it becomes like your drug. I found a new passion, right? I found a new love. These books and the kids, I fell in love. I'll tell you a real quick story. There was a girl in the 8th grade, I'm brand new, and they had 100 kids do a manuscript for themselves. So I'm autographing them, I'm talking to them. This little girl comes up to me, she goes, "Oh, Mr. Renteria, I really loved your book." And I said, "Thank you." She goes, "I have a question for you." I said, "What's that?" And she leans over and she puts her hand on my hand and she goes, "Are you single?" And I looked at her and I said, "Yeah, why do you ask?" And she says, "My mommy's single." So, how do you not fall in love, right? So I fell in love with the kids and that whole mentoring piece. So I was able to give back because I didn't have mentors. I didn't have somebody tell me that they loved me other than my mom, right? And because I didn't have that, I found a way to reach and connect with these kids.
That's interesting. And by the way, for a little girl to do that with you, that's like the highest compliment she could pay you. I'm trying to fix you up with my mother.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, so you passed the test.
I didn't go there. Looking back, I should have probably got a picture or something like that. But no, it's.
Do you have a picture of her?
Yeah. That's funny.
So now, this is interesting to me. You've come so far. You've got a lot going on, and one of the ways that I would credit me for being who I am is I have a lot of warrior friends around me, people that I confide in daily. We have talks. We're all having our own struggles, but my therapy comes through having deep conversations with people who have the warrior spirit in them. Does not mean they're perfect, but it means we're all fighting through the same thing. And you and I know after this, we are going to I'm going to be leaning on you and we'll have conversations and stuff. Do you have a little warrior trust? Like, do you have certain people that you talk with regularly that keep you shored up, or are you just an island?
I think it's a combination, it's a blend, right? In 2011, I received an International Humanitarian Award where they took my books to Pakistan, Afghanistan.
Wow.
Because they were building schools for girls and women. And somebody had heard me speak, and I met this guy named Greg Mortensen. He wrote a book called Three Cups of Tea and Stones to Schools. And so I received this humanitarian award, and I brought my mother in from California. 1,500 people from all over the world that came in to come see me get this humanitarian award. So we go home that night, and my mother, she's looking at the humanitarian award is on the kitchen table, and she goes, "Come here, I want to talk to you." And I said, "What?" She goes, "Come here." And she pulled me in. She leaned in, and she said, "This isn't about you. This is bigger than you." So she helped me to understand that, don't get caught up in all this stuff, right? Because it's just noise, right? And it's not about you. So I have some people I do talk to and I trust, but my mother, back again, put me in check to understand that you have to stay grounded.
That's awesome. So where is your mom right now?
She's in California, and I was just with her a few weeks ago. I went out there, and I met with some people. I was at a conference in Vegas this summer, and they do ministry to the homeless folks in L.A. on Skid Row. So they were telling me about it, and I wanted to go. So they invited me in. So I got a chance after 46 years to see where my father died and how bad it's gotten with all the homeless population down on Skid Row. It's like tents and boxes, and it was sad. You see mice and rats running out of those tents and all those boxes. The place smelled, the stench was terrible. There's people walking around like zombies, and it was just awful. But one thing I never saw coming that caught me blindsided, it was emotional, just threw me almost to the ground, was the people from the ministries that were doing the work were giving my books out to the homeless people, and I didn't know that was going to happen. I'm like, what is going on? And there was a line of people wanting to talk to me because they had been giving out the books for several weeks before I was coming. So that was really, to see how God is working in real time to reach these folks. And so we have to figure out a way, look at, the sad part is we have money for wars and can't feed the poor. So we have to eradicate this mess, It's terrible that people are living on the streets, especially not just the veterans who serve to protect and fight for the streets that they're currently living on.
Yep.
So it's wrong. So no, I think that what we're talking about here is changing the landscape for our youth across America and around the world.
And you had mentioned, to build leaders, right? Make leaders out of people. I have contemplated this homeless scenario. I don't even have a plan. I can't even come up with a way that will ease it. Building little cities and all this stuff. It doesn't solve the problem, though.
No, and I don't have the answer. And then now with all this stuff happening with the migrants coming in from all over the country, not getting political, but I'm going to call it the way I see it. If it's illegal, why are you allowing it to happen? And then to add insult to injury, you're funding it by providing millions of dollars across the United States. So all these different cities where you're busing them in. So if it's illegal, why is the administration funding it? So I have to say it's about the votes. It's about control. It's about power.
Yep. And we don't have to get too political because that wasn't our mission here. Right. Our mission is to talk about your mission and my mission.
Yeah.
But that's part of what we're trying to dilute all of that crazy stuff that happens because it is all about money and power, and it isn't about the people anymore. And we have to make it about the people.
Look, it should be pretty simple. The way I built Barrio in the last 18 years, and I got that guidance from the problem-solving process of the United States Army. It's 3 steps. Recognize a problem, find a solution, take action. We follow those 3 steps. That's how we get to the solution piece. So I built, based on what I learned in the military, those 3 steps is how I built what I built with Barrio.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I love about your mindset about getting into as young as the people as you can, because you start out with a book and then you did the animation, which appeals to younger people, and then the coloring book even younger. We're in such a bad way here. There's, every problem has a cause, right? And when we look at the problem itself and we go, okay, we're going to propose a solution and we're going to put the solution in play, we may have cured the problem, but there's something upstream of the problem that's causing the current problem. And if we don't bite that in the butt, we can create unintended consequences, right? So,
Good point.
I don't want to get political either, but like green energy, for instance, you want to create something that doesn't produce carbon, but in the process, you're producing way more carbon to produce that thing that doesn't produce carbon, so that's creating another problem, an unintended consequence. So, but by you talking and educating the youth at the earliest possible stage, this is something that will grow, and eventually, by the time these young children are adults, we won't have homeless problem anymore because they will be the leaders,
Right, and we have to focus on leadership, right? So the Barrio books it's about leadership skills, life lessons, things they're not teaching in the schools anymore, right? You've gotten rid of God, you've gotten rid of the trades, right? And you have the thing about who's more popular and who cares, right? So we're building weak humans. I'm not a real big fan, and somebody may disagree with this. What I'm going to say is, these participation trophies for the kids aren't doing them justice because not everybody wins in life. So you got to build them. You got to take your licks, right? There's winners and there's losers, and if you don't win this time, you try harder next time. You win the next one. I mean, in business, I haven't been perfect. I've made money and I've lost money. I've made some poor decisions. Even building Barrio, I didn't know what I was doing. I spent a lot of money I probably should not have spent because I didn't know what I was doing. But now I know. So now I can help others who want to come into this space to avoid the pitfalls I've made, both in business and or in building something like a program or as an author, when I started off as an author. So I think that, we have to learn from people who have been there before us, right? And then for me, the question comes up as, well, how did you know all this stuff without role models? I said, the world itself and all the tangible things it had to offer were for me the ultimate role model. So I learned from life, and I stole with pride in a good way to help mold and develop the man I became.
Well, there's 2 ways to learn. You can learn from the positive and you can learn from the negative. We as humans, we learn quicker from the negative. You stick your finger in an electric socket, right? So you had your mom, who was a very good positive role model, but then you had your father and stepfather. They taught you what not to do and what not to be, right? Just like my mother, my mother was a great person, but I grew up as a latchkey kid. Do you know what the latchkey kid is? It's a term I think that came up in the 70s for when both parents started working, and then the kids would come home with the key. They'd be home by themselves till the parents came home from work. So I was a latchkey kid. You know, I grew up in the 70s, and there was a bag of pot and a little vial of cocaine on my kitchen table my entire childhood, and I was by myself. And I never ever smoked a joint, never took a puff on a joint, never have done any kind of drug, not because of anything other than when I saw the adults do it, they lost control of themselves. Like it scared me. So, and maybe some divine intervention too. I mean, I used to roll the joints. I would watch them, and I'd roll the joints, and I'd put them in the bag, and my mom would come home and say, well, did you do that? I go, yeah, but I didn't smoke any, you know. So we learned, you know, to do as I say, not as I do, kind of. Like I always say, we have the choice to be the circuit breaker. So there's a lot of kids that come from abusive parents, and their parents were abused, and their parents were abused. And by the time it gets down to them, the buck stopped there. You are the circuit breaker. You trip the circuit, that moves forward no more, you know? So it's like me with, you know, I had a deadbeat father, you know, and I try to be as best father as I can with my sons. And my mission, I think, Doctor, we're on the same mission here. And I see some collaborations coming in the future. Everything you said, I'm in agreement with. I believe our country's we're in trouble. The world's in trouble, but I just think this power structure for money and power, the gap is getting bigger and bigger between regular people and the people in control. And it's up to people like us to build leaders and build warriors and come together. Like that's super important. Like we're flying around doing our thing, but you know, the commanders need to come together. You know what I'm saying? So,
I mean, I've met with both parties, not getting political, but I said the one thing that you're not doing is building what's called relationships, right? You just want people to side with whatever side you're on, and you really don't care about the community. So we have to get people and hold them accountable to get involved. I have people say, well, when I get elected, I'll do this, and that. I said, no, do it now, win, lose, or draw. Don't tell me what you're going to do when you get in. Do it now.
Amen. I think the change now, at least for me, I've been watching all this stuff and observing, and I've been cynical my whole life. My godfather was in the mafia. He taught me about street tax, and everything gets skimmed, especially our tax dollars. So I never paid attention to politics, but now I have to pay attention to who's doing what, because we're in a really bad way. Yeah. I mean, you know, I get censored. They take my stuff down. Like when have in our lifetimes has our speech been monitored and stuff like that? So it's concerning for me. That's a bad step. So I think the only way we can change is not with our vote, because I don't even trust if our votes are being tabulated correctly. It's from the ground up. It's up to us now. It's to build an army, hold higher powers accountable, so we can get our country back.
And I also think, you know, we have to, a lot of these corporations who are making, you know, millions and trillions of dollars on the consumers, is holding them accountable, right? To make sure they're part of giving back. Like I'll give a plug out for Papa John's. We've been together for 5 years, going on 6 years. And, you know, they've made merchandise. We've co-branded. You know, this year we've had 10,000 families together, you know, with gift cards. And, you know, they have a promo that goes, if you put in the code Barrio30, Barrio30 gets you 30% off of Papa John's for the entire state of Illinois and Northwest Indiana. So, you know, in hard economic times, 30% is a lot of money to save. And there's no limits, you know, there's no expiration on it. So people are now having pizza parties and, you know, whatever with the kids. And a lot of these families who can't afford or maybe not be able to afford a pizza party, now they can. So, I mean, that's one way of one corporation giving back.
That's awesome.
And I also worked with Jim Overvice from Overvice Ice Cream. The first time I worked with him, he donated 1,000 books to East L.A. High School.
Wow, nice.
And thousands of books just until recently when he retired down, and now he's in Florida, retired.
They have a big Oberweis is it North Aurora there?
They're headquartered in North Aurora. Yeah. But Overvice Ice Cream helped to save a lot of kids as well.
That's awesome. So, I'm only asking you this question because I'm coming out with my first book. Do you know how many copies of your book have been printed?
Probably 500,000.
Wow.
Something like that collectively, because you have the book series. in English, Spanish, and digital format, right? So it's not just the book itself, right? Right now I'm in the process of recording my audio book, which will be out the first quarter of 2024.
Now, is that the audio version of
from the Barrio to the Border? I'm doing my own read, so we're already in chapter 4.
Oh, interesting, cool.
Yeah, so do my own read, and then like I said this morning, we're going to set up a meeting with some film producers because we'd like to release it as a film. So that's on the radar for in the next couple of years, hopefully,
awesome.
God willing, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Doctor, I am honored that you came onto my podcast. Anything I can do in my lifetime to further your cause, we're on the same mission. So you're way further on down the road, but I'll go to war shoulder to shoulder with you anytime. And I keep alluding to you, who's your go-to person, whatever, who has your back. I will be one of those people. So
well, I appreciate that, and likewise, I think we have to unite. Not just as neighborhoods or cities, but as a country. And I believe that if we do that, then we can help change the landscape for youth across America.
I agree with you.
And lastly, if we're going to wrap up here, I want to say we need to take care of each other, because taking care of each other, how the foundation of this world was built. And I believe if we build on that foundation, then we can be a champion of this place here we call home, to take care of our families, our neighbors, our community, our great city, and then beyond.
Thank you for that. And I just want to ask you one more question that you sparked in me. We do have division in this country. One of the things that fascinates me with people is somebody will come to you with an opinion and they'll say, this is the way it is, and it isn't your opinion. You have a different opinion. And you'll say, can you show me what you've looked at? What have you researched? What kind of data do you have? Please provide it to me, because I would like to see it. I don't agree with you, but I'm willing to look at whatever you looked at to get to your opinion. Mm-hmm. And they don't have anything. And then when you go, well, I don't agree with you, and here's why, here's what I have, please take a look at this, because this is why I have the opinion, and they don't want to look at it. So that's called cognitive dissonance in some chapters of neuroscience. And that, to me, is one of the cause and effects of why there's division, especially politically. Somebody makes a political statement, he or she is a criminal, and you go, okay, show me. Well, they don't have anything. They're regurgitating what's been pounded into their head from the news and the media, the social media. They don't have anything to back up what they say. And that's fine. You can have the opinion, but then when someone has the counter opinion is giving you information, like here's stats and data, like during the whole COVID thing, I was providing science and studies to people, and they didn't want to look at them. They said, follow the science. I'm like, here's the science I've been following. Take a look at it. They don't want to look at it. And that's part of the reason why we have division. We need to talk to each other and listen to each other and not just draw a line in the sand. And I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Well, I mean, taking it back to education, right? I've had people say, I need to see your stats. And I said, listen, the model's broken. I said, you're measuring what I'm doing based on quantitative data versus qualitative data. So the anecdotal evidence is evidently, without question, clear that this is working in real time. Otherwise, how do you explain the usage or the testimonials or the videos or the kids screaming, coming unglued when you go give a speech at a school? You can't force kids to do that kind of stuff. So I think that people have to understand that the model's it's broke. And we have to come up with a new model, which is what we've created. We created a new model. I
read some of the curriculum, as I read the book, and then I went along with the questions that went along with each chapter of the book that they asked kids. I mean, that's brilliant, because they're reading something that interests them and they're absorbing it. And then you're asking questions. I just think that's brilliant.
Well, we're teaching kids, not just what to think, but how to think. Right. And to question. And I think that, back in the day when they had stranger danger and everybody knew you couldn't, be careful, this is provoking kids to thought. And I think that it's important that as educators that are listening, or parents who may be listening, that, that you engage. I'd love to have conversations with people following this podcast, or maybe somebody that you may know, that we can figure out how to work together. Because it does take a village to save and raise a child.
Yes, I agree. All right. Thank you, Dr. Renteria, for being here. Thank you, Jim Rabb, for introducing us.
Absolutely.
We are going to have more collaborations in the future. Thank you for serving our country, sir.
Thank you.
I am very grateful for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Frank Lardino with the Warrior Podcast. Remember, there's a warrior inside us all. I will put some links into Dr. Renteria's stuff. And thank you for joining us today. Take care, everybody.